下午好，欢迎大家来参加设计外大师说。今天非常荣幸的邀请到国际著名的设计师 Heatherwick。
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I'm missing China.
China is missing you. 今天我们采用的是北京和伦敦的直播连线，因为我们现在全球的疫情在慢慢的恢复，但是呢，这种疫情其实似乎改变了我们很多的思考和交流的方式，甚至我们可以这样面对面进行一个国际连线的直播。当然，我们今天背景选用的是北京的这个 CBD， 能够让他看到整个中国在北京最新的一些代表性的建筑。
It's an amazing image and lovely to see so much nature in the foreground as well.
大师说就是记录我们这个10大被选中的人，我们这一次已是第5期了。我们从对话了艾曼的创始人 Isaac， 还有就是 Thomas 的好朋友科克库马威廉伍。那今天我们的直播间呢，依然邀请到了就是几十位的地产商朋友一起参与进来，也包括瑞安和生、华润、万科、融创等等。在直播间里也有就是Thomas 在上海1000树的这个建设者天安。对，其实我们每次看到托马斯的作品，其实都很惊叹他的创意是怎么来的，然后每一次的作品都给我们不一样，所以我们作为媒体呢，特别想挖掘他设计背后的故事。So let's start.
Okay, shall I go? I'll share my screen just so I have some images to be able to share.
Yeah, that would be appreciated. You know, the all worldwide are all locked down today. During this COVID-19 pandemic situation, what inspiration has it brought to you? Is there any impact it have on your design ideas?
You know, how incredible that we're speaking today. I think that the world has been, I mean, in a sense, we have so much privilege. We have this tragedy that has been happening across the planet, which has been teaching us a lot. The last two decades has been inventing the way for us to be able to cope with this so much better. So the world's been inventing how we can base ourselves and work from home. And the ability to study for a doctorate lying in bed, to order all the food you could possibly need, and to be able to witness the world, to be able to talk like this, it's extraordinary. So I think we are in a time where I think more people will invest more in their homes. I think everyone's learned that when things go wrong, our homes matter more. And so I think there will be a lot of caring for homes, but I also think because now we've all been having that trigger to learn to use the technologies that maybe haven't been being used quite enough by everybody, it means, for me, the exciting thing is that the physical world gets more important. Because if you're going to leave your home, your place that you go to has to mean something in your heart. And so emotion, designing for emotion, I think is really important. And people aren't stupid. You don't have to have studied architecture to feel that a place you go to has a soul and is authentic. And so in our studio, I guess we feel affirmation that this direction we've been trying to pursue over the last 20 years is going to be needed more than ever, because we will come back together. We are starting to come back together around the world. And this is no substitute, really, for being together. I'm able to work with my Chinese friends and developers, but I'm missing being in China. And there's nothing like the atmosphere of the street food and the life and the energy. We were working from home in Britain, and I've just returned to my studio, and I've got a permanent smile on my face. And there's a smaller team of us here in the studio now, but you can't beat that energy. And I think there's a strong alternative, but you can't beat this. But I was just going to show, I mean, like the project that we're working on with Tianan in Shanghai, the 1,000 Trees project. I hope projects like this will be clues of what the future placemaking needs to be to mean something to people. So we had this site which is a couple of kilometers away from the Bund in Shanghai, with lots of towers that are very basic and quite strong and almost like tombstones, these gray concrete tombstones. And we had the main art district here in Shanghai. And so we were interested in whether we could make something that was softer. With all these concrete towers, there was the nature of the Suzhou Creek, and there was the park along the edge. And we needed to have 1,000 columns. So we looked at putting a Chinese mountain tree directly on top of every one of the 1,000 columns. I won't talk through every detail of it, but it meant that we could make something that is a very big project, 350,000 square meters, which in China, that's a normal scale in the redevelopment of the cities, but to try to make organic and more human-centered. So it is big, but it also has gathering spaces, but more human-scale gathering spaces. So there are 270 of these outdoor terraces, so that every one of those restaurants or kindergarten or shop could even have a place where you could go and sit out in the fresh air. And back a century ago, I think for health, people were realizing that we should spend a bit more of our time outdoors. And for half of the year, outdoors the temperature is good and possible. So I think the spirit of keeping the old and building the new in with the old will matter a lot. And we're keeping all the old buildings on the site, even if it's a bit strange, and working around them because they have a spirit that new buildings can never quite compare with. And on the city side, it's all about vitality. And I think the new future of buildings is going to depend on making places that feel alive and busy and not just big. And I think that's for me, the big opportunity in China is that there's projects on such a scale, but I feel that often, and this is all around the world, people are not thinking about that small scale enough. And so every detail of this, it's not high budget, it's not going to have the most luxury retailers in, but gradually it's completing. The first phase is now nearing completion, and the second phase, the foundations are coming up. The project will remove 21 tons of carbon from the air every year and create oxygen for 2,000 people per year. And it will also, the things that the trees do is they also take the dust out of the air. And so I think that things like this, I think there will be a hunger from people to make places more natural and more different from their home, and therefore more human in spirit. And so the project is now starting, the trees and plants and shrubs. So there's 1,000 trees in the project. Altogether, there is 250,000 plants. And so the project is an excuse for something that I hope is about being more human.
Yeah, this project is really a sustainable and very green and human-centered project. Very impressive. And we will also discuss it in detail later. You think maybe outdoor and human, the connection between the humans will be more important than ever, right?
I do. I think that we have been pushed apart from each other, but I actually think that's also been teaching us to cherish together how precious that is. And I think to start off with, everyone was amazed, oh, it's okay. It's all okay to work from home. It's okay, it's okay. It is okay. And the technology has supported us so amazingly. All our gadgets and things are brilliant, but it's not brilliant. It's okay. So it gives, I think there's more possibilities of how to work and how to live. I think that's broadened, but I think that we will cherish at the small scale our families a bit more, and we will also cherish our colleagues. And so I think it's very good. It's a bit like we've all been given a mini sabbatical, like time to take back and look and then come back with fresh eyes. So I think all across the planet, people come with fresh eyes, but our human incredible achievements in medicine, in science, in all the different aspects of technology, they come from being together. But maybe we don't have to be imprisoned together. In places of work, I think many people have felt like they're a prisoner. They come in on Monday morning and leave on Friday night and they're a prisoner. I think we've seen that you don't have to be a prisoner of your work. You could work from home some of the time, work from a special place, but that place must be really special, because the more your employee works from home, the more potential there is for them to easily leave and work for somebody else. So when they come in to a place, it's got to really excite them about the purpose of that business. So there are lots of things we're interested in. We're working for a few developers now and technology companies thinking about, we've designed their headquarters together with a firm called BIG, and we have been thinking about how to bring together thousands of people for work. And now we're thinking about how to allow them to come together more sporadically, but still the human dimension matters more than ever.
Yeah, exactly. The pandemic gave us more opportunities and to give us more time to fill up our energy, and then we can back to work full of energies. So you talk about China. You say you are missing China so much. So actually, for Chinese people, you are well known by the UK pavilion in 2010 Shanghai World Expo, the Seed Cathedral. So we all know the Seed Cathedral, like the UK pavilion, it was with a very limited budget. So back to that moment when you get these projects with such very limited budget, what did you think about it? Cathedral is very cool, very creative. How did you came up the idea like this? Because all of your works are all very innovative.
Oh, well, it's nice to talk about it now because it's exactly 10 years ago.
Yeah.
The expo was beginning and it was being shown to the world properly, and Chinese people received it so well. So it was very exciting for us. The way we began that project was the way that we begin every project. And it's not that I am a person who goes with my pen and does a master sketch and everybody follows my vision. We are very analytical, and the projects are led by trying to invent a scheme that is particular for one place. So if we do a project in one place, I hope it will have its own ideas different from another place. And I think I was reacting against the way that many pieces of architecture were duplications of somewhere else and somewhere else and somewhere else. And that made me sad for the place. It felt rude to just have dull, repetitive buildings being created that were not nourishing people's desire to connect and be intrigued. And so at the World Expo, we had this weird problem that we had 250 pavilions being designed at the same moment. And normally I love to see a site and respond to existing buildings. But our neighbors were France and Italy, and they were designing their pavilion at the same time as us, and the Netherlands. And so we had to think, and we had been given half the budget. Annoyingly, we'd been given half the budget of the other Western nations, but we all had a site the same size. But the British government, who were very polite and very known for being this kind of English gentlemen who run the foreign services, and they said, there's going to be voting, make sure you're in the top 5. So we had to think, okay, you've given us half the budget, but actually you're say everything about Britain, but you really mean just win, just be. And we realized it wasn't just about winning. It's very logical business sense, in that each pavilion would have a 3-hour queue or 4-hour queue. And so most people didn't go to the expo for more than 1 or 2 days. So unless you're in the top 5, you're wasting the government's money. And every project we have has tight budget limitations. So in a way, our thinking was to say, right, there's 1 million people coming every day. They're tired. Their eyes are busy with seeing so much stuff. It's like when you try to do too much shopping in one day and you end up, help. And just thought, how can we be refreshing to their eye? And it felt that one problem that often when we researched other pavilions, what they would always do was they would show cliches. And so the cliches of Britain were tea bags, Sherlock Holmes, how it rains all the time, and their queens, castles. And we just thought, China's not stupid. China knows all of that stuff. And do we always do the same cheesy cliches that people expect? And then you're like, oh, what British pavilion? Yeah, it's doing the Italian one will have spaghetti. French one will have baguettes and garlic. Or you just thought, let's say something that is fresh about Britain that maybe even British people don't know. And I think that we tried to be very respectful to the visitor. And this idea came up of just saying, what if we look and see how seriously China is taking the development of cities and their interest in how you make ecologically better cities. And I think the British government was not realizing how advanced China was. And originally the UK was the leader in the world in nature research and integrating nature into cities. And the world's first botanical institute was in London. And we spoke to them and they agreed to give us 250,000 seeds. And so they made a partnership with the Kunming Botanical Institute and they gave us 250,000 seeds. And so our idea, because we had so little budget, we said, well, you don't need a site as big as a football pitch to all be on the cover of a Chinese national paper. You just need one thing to speak to people's emotion and heart. And so we focused on 1/6 of the site and decided to let the other 5/6 be forgettable. That's where we could have the toilets and cupboards and government meeting rooms, but could we make one thing that connected with people? And so we just, again, we thought, what will everybody else do? And how do we not do that? So we had to predict as designers, what will other people do? What's the trend? And then how to be a jump ahead of that trend. So it was very much analysis, very logical, just thought most people will make buildings of funny shapes. Let's not make shape, let's just make a texture. And this was led by also the way that most people, if there's 1 million people every day, you can't have 1 million people going inside any building. And so how could someone feel they had seen it even from the outside? And so this was the pavilion, but actually everyone thought the pavilion was just the seed part in the middle. And you walked across the bridge and inside was just daylight coming through 66,000 of these optics with a different seed in the end. But it was our analysis. I mean, I was proud when we won the prize for the top foreign pavilion at the expo. I was so happy for the team because it was design analysis that got us there, not random luck. And I think that every project, that's so important, is your analysis. And I think that often people are obsessed with self-expression rather than really looking and thinking. And in Britain afterwards, British property developers, I remember speaking to them, and I could remember they were used to British architects always having a style. And so when I showed them a hairy building, they would look at me like, I don't need a hairy office building. I don't need a hairy apartment. And I was there thinking, no, what this is a solution to a problem. And what was so interesting in China, and I found that Chinese city mayors and property developers didn't see it like that. they saw it as a solution to a problem that had worked, and they then were asking us to do projects, not expecting that they would be hairy. So I saw more vision in, actually more vision in the Chinese people in how they responded to this project, and more vision in the Expo Bureau than the British government. The British government were very scared. And then more vision in the property developers who spoke to us afterwards. And so I've loved the chances we've had to think about projects in China after.
Yeah, I was very lucky to visit the Shanghai Expo, and I would like to say the UK pavilion is like got a huge success, because I think it was around like 5 hours waiting line. That is very a refreshing building, and when people get into the building, you will feel very cooled down, you know, during that hottest season in Shanghai. So that is very innovative. And we all know all of your projects are very, like, the ideas are fun and creative and very innovative. And you are always breaking the rules, and normal ways to approach the design. Such as the sponge hair you just showed in your slides. And also in Shanghai, another your very famous project, the Finance Center. The spinning idea is very interesting. Can you talk about that, like this spinning idea?
Well, this is a picture of our studio. This is my view behind this screen of where we work in London. So when we work, me and my team, very much affected by having lots of tests and experiments around us that influence us. And in Shanghai, we had this site right next to the old town. And so the old town was back down here below our site, and the river right next to it. And it was 450,000 square meters, and Fosun commissioned us. And so I asked, I won the competition to do the project that happened originally. And then I asked my friends, 2 of the senior partners at Foster and Partners, to join me. And we collaborated together to design the project. And so we designed, in a way, a very simple collection of blocks that could allow us to then use stone, Chinese stone, to make the frame. So it was a sort of simple notion. But the project that you wanted me to talk about now was in the heart. There was a public space, and there was a desire for a cultural center. So we wanted to make something precious at the heart. I mean, such a big project. Again, you always need to balance the big moves that you're making with the human scale moves. And we were interested in how we could connect in a digital time where everybody has been obsessed with digital technology, but also digital technology becomes out of date very soon. And when you build it into architecture, often it's a bit embarrassing in 5 years or 10 years. And so this was a building that was going to be a performance space. And we researched the Chinese theaters and got very interested in how the theaters often had a roof over the actors, and the stage was often lifted up, and the audience got wet in some of the old theaters, and they would be outside looking at the actors. And so we had this problem, which was we had the river on one side of the building, and we had the public space that we had designed on the other side of the building. And so I was torn, because do we face the river, or do we face the public space at the heart of the development? And it felt, we're torn. The river is so powerful in Shanghai, but so is the old town. And so do we do this? It was like a conundrum. And then thought, well, maybe the physical could be the solution. And maybe the analogy of the tassels, that some of the amazing headdresses in traditional Chinese costume had, were so beautiful. And thought, well, maybe we could make a curtain from these tassels, and that could move. And we had visited the BMW factory in Germany a number of years ago and seen the way they produced the cars, and the cars were hanging on a production line and heavy cars moving through the factory as they were being finished. And so that gave the idea, could we make a curtain that moved? So there are actually 3 curtains of these tassels, and they move so that they can face the river or face the square or close or open. I know that Zoom, it's quite hard to make an animation work, so I hope that this is visible a little bit. But this idea of making the skin of a building move was exciting, and Fosun went for it and supported the idea, and it moves very, very slowly. And so when you're there, you have to stop. And then when you realize that the actual whole architecture is moving, that felt to us something that would be powerful and fundamental. And it meant that we could also develop details to help it with the weather and if there is a typhoon. So these pieces that feel like bamboo actually are bumpers, so that if there is strong winds, they can bump each other and not damage each other. But I'm always interested in how you go from the very large scale, and China, everything's large scale, also down to the small scale, because if there isn't beauty and passion in small scale, people feel it, and they can feel it's just a kind of dead project that looks good in a photograph, but hasn't got the close-up love.
So even in this such a huge scale building, you're also focused on detail. And that is very impressive.
It's so important. And my background was that I was brought up around lots of makers. And I think architecture lost a sense of craftsmanship over the last half a century and became very corporate and cold and sterile. And China has the most incredible craftspeople across this vast country you have, which is just full of people who can make extraordinary things. So you never have enough budget to do everything bespoke, but the pieces that people get close to, whether that's with ceramic or wood or metal, you could always give some attention to. And I think people really value it. And now, after this crisis, we have to make sustainable places. I think it meets the sustainability crisis agenda, but also the new climate we're in, where more people feel that they could work in different ways. Places need to connect with them and be utterly not like your home. And I think we can't be lazy anymore.
Yeah, so we all know the bottom of the tube for the finance center, they are painted as different shade of red. Is that related to Chinese culture?
We did lots of tests, and this idea of a spark of color and using the different reds just felt the natural thing that fitted with the context. And but I don't think everything in China has to be red.
Yeah, it is very impressive. It is looks very unique, but also has some Chinese cultural elements. It is very impressive. We talked about your projects in China, and now let's talk about another very identity projects from you, the Hudson Vessel. You know, the Hudson Vessel always be acknowledged as the giant pine cone. Can you tell us about the fantastic idea behind it?
Oh, yes, happily. In New York, there was a new district being made with more than 2 million square meters of space, including apartments and workspace and retail space. And in the middle was a very large new public space. But people in New York weren't used to going there. And we were asked originally for our advice about that space. A nice office tower is okay, a nice apartment tower is okay, but to really make people feel that there is a new district in New York pulling them, there seemed to be a power to something that would give strong identity. And instead of trying to make all those buildings turn into a competition of trying too hard, it seemed, could you focus on something? And they had thought maybe a sculpture, but I've always been interested in things that we touch and where everyone can use them and go to them. And so we made a suggestion, and to my amazement, that suggestion happened. And it was very, very ambitious, forward-thinking developer. And in a way, China and America have so much in common in the scale of ambition of people. And so there was somebody there who in a way thinks in a very Chinese way. He just was willing to have an unusual thought about how to make a place. And so when thinking about how do we engage people to use their body, everyone now is more aware of their body and exercise. So we thought, could we make something that is like an exercise device without going to a gym, where you see people on their running machines in gyms and obsessed with their bodies. And in India, when we were doing some research, we had seen these incredible structures which were dug down into the ground to go to, which were called a step well, and the water was deep in the ground. And the stairs going down looked so beautiful. And clearly it was like a dance, like a choreography moving down to that water. And we were thinking how we could bring people together. And the heart of most of our projects is about bringing people together. But we had railway lines underneath us. So we could only go up. It wasn't appropriate to go down because this new land was land on top of railway lines. So this led to the idea of saying, well, what if we could make an amphitheater that brings people together, that lifts itself up and has 2,500 stairs and 156 flights and 80 landings and 16 stories high. You know, when did you last walk 16 stories? Just thought, right, okay, there's a power, even if you don't like it, it's free and you can walk up to the top. And this was, it maybe doesn't work on Zoom, but this is a little footage.
Yeah, 16 stairs exercise, that is quite an exercise for everyone.
But there is also an elevator. So here, there is a curving elevator. So someone who is less able to walk upstairs, it curves. So it was an innovative elevator, actually, that lifts people to the top. And it's been exciting making this project. You can see the elevator here, which is prioritized for people, obviously, who are not so able-bodied. And I think that cities now, their public spaces need to work very hard. And often people copy the formulas of other cities too much. We're interested in what is the formula that can be special for each place, because then you'll want to go there and travel and you feel like it belongs to you because it's special. And we all think we're special. Even in China with 1 billion people, everybody thinks they're special. It's human nature. And trying to make something that they can have a special experience and give them a different view on the world around them. And this also, when you look up the underside, you can see everyone moving around, which worked very well. And we've even had people proposing on it. And so it's become part of the city. And so our passion is making pieces of city that can become part of the future of that place and mean something to people.
Yeah, you just talk about the projects that could connect people all together. It could create lots of memories for people and also be a piece of city. So I think it's quite similar for the 1,000 tree projects from you. It is also a piece of city and also to connect people together. So can we talk about the 1,000 tree more in detail? So, you know, the 1,000 tree in Shanghai is in a very unique site. It's a historical site from Rong family. So when you design that project, what difficulties you have encountered for the site and historical problems?
I think that the challenge with the Thousand Trees project was to try to amplify the art district. M50 art district was there. And quite often a new development will be very shiny and very slick. And the art district is a collection of old buildings that were flour mill, and then they'd been used for plastics factories in later times. And we didn't want to be the wall squashing the art district. Instead, it felt the special thing about that area is the art district. And there was a heritage of graffiti that was really interesting there. So how could we make the art district get bigger instead of us be the prison jailer holding the art district? And that's why the shape evolved from growing from the art district. And these columns with the trees meant that we could even put them in the art district and artists could work with them, and they could be, it could feel like it's an organic growing of the art district. So that was how that project came about, and trying to deliberately be many voices, not just one voice. So the southern facade, hundreds of artworks built into it, where the graffiti artists, various different graffiti artists have been involved in creating the facade. And that can change over time. I didn't get a chance to properly show that. I'm sorry I don't have more images now, but it was all about making places be more complex, because the interesting pieces of city that we like are often a bit chaotic. So how can we have vision and interesting chaos? And so I've really valued that Tianan, and I think Patrick is on this line, that really mattered to him from the beginning, and he supported us in trying to make a very human-centric place. When something is that big, you've got to keep finding lots of interesting things. And it doesn't matter if they don't coordinate all together. You want a real place, grows and has many points that catch your eye.
The 1000 tree is actually connected. The art district is like an organic project growing from the art district, right?
Yeah, and also I think that the idea that you have creativity and then you have offices where you're not being creative, I think that we've learned more and more that people who do anything really well, they are creative people in any field of life. And so I think it is a fake distinction if you say this is the not creative bit and this is the creative bit. I think it's important that actually both learn from each other. And that was why we joined those together.
Okay, so it is well balanced with the art district next to it. And for the historical side, we saw the photos that the new buildings actually are wrapped up the historical building from Rong family. Is there any thinking behind them?
The reason we made a big effort to keep all the old buildings was because no new building can compete with the texture and that you get with older structures. So in all our projects, when we can, we try to retain the old original structure to work with, because I think that if we live in a world where everything is a spaceship that's landed onto the ground, we lose something. And I think that we felt that the contrast could work, and that we must allow contrast. Old and new next to each other give each other energy. The old structure makes the new structure feel precious, and the new structure makes the old structure feel precious. So for us, they were really valuable and precious. Precious, precious, precious. We really needed to keep them. And one of the buildings next to the Suzhou Creek we kept, but because there had been flood defense work on the creek, we actually lifted it up just because we wanted it to be right there on the river edge for people walking along and not at the lower level.
Yeah, so historic preservation is really a part of sustainable, and sustainable is very important for the architecture. And you talk about human-centered experience, all of the projects you've done. Experience is also a hottest topic for the design field now. So can you share with us, when we talked about the Eden project, can you share with us the biggest impact of design on experience?
Happily. So the project in Singapore, we're just finishing actually two residential projects, one in New York and one in Singapore, which I thought I'd maybe quickly show before we finished. And so in Singapore, again, we visited all the other residential apartments, and we saw that they were very dry. And now this COVID crisis, I mean, so many of us have spent a lot of time in our homes. We were interested to think in London. Certainly, I was brought up in a house with a garden, and it was lovely to have the green and the smell of the soil, and when it rained, and seeing plants move and life. But we lived in a house that was 3 stories high. So if you leave your socks upstairs, you're running up to get them and going down, and it's not so efficient. And so apartments work so well on 1 floor, but you can't make single-story houses. It's too expensive. So we wondered whether you could have an apartment and a garden and find a way to make an apartment with a garden, not just a balcony. And when you look at these other apartments around, they're all so dry. And so this project has thousands of plants integrated into it, and each apartment has a garden. And we also have created cross ventilation to minimize the use of air conditioning. And so the building is less feeling like a big block, but its floor plan is very practical. There are square rooms, but there is a living space that blends with garden and living space so that you can live indoors and outdoors together much more. So these are some new photographs as it's just being completed. It's so many buildings just feel heavy. So we wanted this to feel like nature had just grown and created the home you live in. So each of the apartments is 300 square meters, and you walk in, and because Singapore has this tropical climate, it means that we don't need a lobby with glass around it. And you arrive and it's all open. We lifted the first apartment, only begins 20 meters up from the ground. And so this is the arrival. You arrive here, and these are the elevators, and there's no glass. And you're just in this open space with garden. And it felt that, could we make a building touch the ground more lightly? And then when you're in the apartment, these plants become your stained glass window, and they're moving and kinetic. And I think that in designing Google's headquarters in California, we've been analyzing more and more the integration of nature into work environments and in home environments that is full of nature. And we have developed our own ways of making details like that are, so the concrete and the wood is the same shape as the shape, like the maps behind me have a topography of each country. This is actually the topography. These maps gave us the idea to make a texture, which is the topography of Singapore. And so, you know, when I was thinking, I wouldn't want to live in an apartment, but I would want to live in an apartment if there's lots of nature. And so that's what we've prioritized. And we've designed all the bathrooms. They're all our own details on the sinks and the elevators. Again, trying to make things so your home feels like it is a unique place for you, rather than you are a tiny repeated element. And we all think we're special. We all need places that can be a sanctuary for us and to regain and find ourselves again. So I just thought I'd quickly show this other project, which is the other thing we've just finished. Well, we're finishing in New York, which is related to nature. There is a walkway called the High Line, which is a park on a disused railway line. And so we've made 270 apartments here, and it's on both sides of the this elevated park. And there were strong restrictions on the zoning, but we focused on, so the entrance is underneath that, and you can go one way or the other, but the project focused on trying to make more texture in the city and making bay windows that allow you to go out into the view and see in diagonal views, not just orthogonal to the building. And the developer who commissioned this owns a window company. So we worked with them to try to make these special windows that could make a texture a bit like a fabric. So it is box building, but each one of these apartments has materials also that will get better as they age. So we did some analysis and found that the apartments that were made from stone and brick sold better. And I'm very interested that, yes, that's about the money that the property developer makes, but that also means that things connect with people's hearts. So we got interested in how we could use materials that felt more homemade, handmade, to create architecture. And these curving windows allow you to get views. And as you can see, there's the Empire State Building. But it was very much about giving love to details. And normally windows are very ordinary. And here, the massing, there were lots of restrictions. So we put the care into these windows and tried to make an architecture that feels very New York, but has detail that is precious. And then also thinking, how do we make the street more alive? And so the street has these units coming down to make the best shop windows, because normally shops all look identical. And so each shop is like a bay window, but there's no expensive curved glass. It's all flat glass. And actually this is aluminium, not expensive bronze. So I just thought I'd quickly show you that for an opposite to Singapore, which is tropical.
Nature could really improve people's experience, especially for a place we live in most of times a day. Here we have some questions from developers wanted to ask you.
Okay.
For the Eden project, we know for that project you use a lot of organic lines, irregular shaped terrace, and lots of greenery indoor. So how to control the cost for this project, or is there no need to control the cost? The budget is very high.
There's always need to control cost because developers are clever, and I've learned so much from working with developers. I've cherished that because a good property developer has an eye for where the value is, and designers always have their vision of everything they want to do. But a really good developer is your partner developing the design, collaborating to find what will matter most to people. And you can say, oh, but they're just thinking about money. But a really good developer is thinking about how to use the money available to do the best thing. So on that project, there is no incredibly expensive stone. Often developers spend a lot of money on stone. And so those balconies are repeating. So we made them from glass reinforced cement. And then the blades that go up are made from concrete that repeats going through. And so the materials aren't expensive materials. Like everything is not expensive material, but the luxury is using plants, is integrating the plants. But plants are actually very cheap. It's the confidence to use them, and people get very scared. And actually, I think it's some of the things we get scared about can also be the thing that brings the value for people who will live there and buy them. And in Singapore, the nation is famous for being the city in the garden. So it had a national objective, and the head of planning for Singapore loved the idea and supported it because it's a national agenda to integrate nature. And annoyingly, we came in under budget in the end. So there was even a little bit of spare budget at the very, very end where we thought, oh, we should have done this or that. But it allowed us to finish the project to a very high quality. And also, I must say that Swire Properties who were the commissioners of that project, have always been very committed to detail and design realized. Sometimes you work with people and they say, just give us the vision and that's all we need. But Swire were very good at carrying all the way through and knowing that they need you all the way to the last detail, because they want you as the passionate people who develop the vision to make sure that the bathroom, that the concrete, that the way the plants are put in. So it was a really lovely collaboration, and that's why you see that result. And I think that it took a Hong Kong developer coming into a Singapore market to look with a different eye and to have that confidence to do that.
Sometimes the most valuable part for a project is not the materials. Actually, we can use the normal materials, but the most valuable part should be the design. The design will create lots of things.
Yeah, the Thousand Trees project. If you look at that, there's no expensive materials at all. It's all concrete. The columns are not clad with expensive cladding. But we've made the concrete that we do use have a detail in it, but because we're repeating the casting, you actually get very good value when you are casting in concrete. If you make a precious mold, the mold then doesn't cost you anything to reuse. So I think there are opportunities with the way that we use materials like concrete to give them love, rather than going, oh, concrete, clad it.
Yeah, that's very valuable and very unique. And also the one last question from the developers. When the New York vessel, the Hudson Vessel completed, lots of people came there and visit there for photo shooting and then post to their Instagram. So it became a very hot spot for a photo shooting. So do you think nowadays social media could impact a lot for daily life? Do you think that social media could impact the design?
I think that the social media can be a useful way for people to think about places. But if you look at the incredible pagodas that were built in China 1,000 years ago, there was no social media then, but there were iconic, captivating things that made an image in your back of your mind and an image in your emotion. And so the literal thing of social media, wanting photographs, to me is just a way to remind everybody projects need to connect with you. And I think if you're just designing for a social media, then it doesn't mean very much. But it's another way to counteract the terrible buildings. Ever since the Second World War in Europe and in America and many places, most new places that were made were terrible, absolutely terrible. No spirit or soul in the buildings that were made, and certainly would not pass the Instagram social media test. And so I think it's a good way to say, look, if it's that boring, maybe it actually isn't human. Maybe it isn't caring about people. So I think what matters is making places that care about the people who are coming. And if social media is another way to remind us that we need to care, that's good. But I think it's important that things have depth, and we really do have the environmental crisis. So how do you make things that can really make a difference in this time of crisis, in all the worlds around us where everything needs that way of thinking, but that also can emotionally connect with us? Because if something doesn't connect with your emotion, it's not sustainable. And there have been lots of buildings in Europe, in America, in Asia, which are technically very sustainable because of the way that they perform, but actually they're soulless and dead, so they're not sustainable. So this sort of human-centric sustainability, I think, really matters. And social media is one way that you can think and look, and the visual does matter, but the deep motivation for a project matters more. And it just comes out in how things look and feel.
Okay, so I'm sorry, we said this should be the last question, but there's a question from a super fan from you. Yeah, super fan from you. So she wanted to ask a question. She's Mario from Strobella Studio. She said, thanks for the lecture. I have a question. The project we saw in the presentation and in general, how far they are from the original concept? How much the final result and final idea go far from the concept?
Oh, okay. That's a very good, very good question, because so often, I mean, when I was studying, you would see a competition winning and you'd see the drawings of something that won a competition and think, oh, and then as it got built, it would get less and less good. And then at the end, you were like, oh, was that it? And there are huge pressures when you're designing to make things affordable, be able to get permission, and to get them to just come into being. And that was the big question in my mind, was how do you make ideas not just in your head but really happen? So in our projects, I try to make them get stronger from the beginning. And actually the UK Pavilion is a good example. We won the competition with an idea that wasn't as good as the idea that we saw. And we didn't have the seeds at the time. And it was an idea, a strong idea, but it didn't have all the ingredients. And I'm a slow thinker, actually, so it's a bit like cooking. You need to just some time for the ingredients to come together in your brain. But I believe you always have cost pressures. And so most of the time in the studio, what we're doing is working out how to keep vision while reducing cost. Sounds very boring, and I'm very happy that there's property developers there, because they know that is the challenge. And often I think designers get angry and just kind of give up and just go, oh, well, it's the developer ruined it, the city, it's their fault, everyone else's fault. Whereas I feel a strong pressure that as the designer, I have a duty to make something for the budget that we have. And that means we work and we work and we work and we keep going. And Patrick online from Shanghai will know that we are committed. When we join a project, it's like you're getting married to a project. It is, and because if your client is passionate, even if whatever money they have, you are together, and then you're together, you're trying to think, how are we going to use this? And your creativity is needed to make a budget, produce something engaging. You always have to keep checking and rethinking about what you're doing to test whether you're doing the right thing. So focus. I'm sorry if I'm giving a bad answer. It's about focus. And you saw the UK Pavilion, which meant we could do something exceptional. In the 1,000 Trees project, actually the facade, the other materials, they're all quite simple materials, but there's focus on the 1,000 Trees and what that will do for the project. And so each project, it takes a while to clear and simplify and then focus. And I think that's what's hard to do as a designer. And I see that many projects, I think, oh, if only you'd focus more. So thank you for that.
So focus could create uniqueness and could create better connection for people and the surroundings. Yeah, thank you so much for today's sharing. Is there any others you want to talk to the audience?
Well, we would love to do more projects in China. I would love to. And I think it's soon coming up for a time when we'll be able to travel again. And I have a little team in Shanghai, and we have a team in Singapore, and we have many friends and collaborators. And so it would be, we would love if there are people who are needing to make places that connect with the public. That's my passion, and it would be a dream to collaborate. So let me know, email or WeChat or WhatsApp or whatever. That would be wonderful.
This is a master talk today, but it's also like a class, like a lecture, very valuable lecture from you. Thank you so very much today for your impressive and precious sharing. Thank you.